Well, today prosecutors began laying out their case in one of the most high-profile trials in connection to the January 6th Capitol assault. They're asking the jury to convict 5 members of the far-right group, the Oath Keepers, who are charged with plotting an armed rebellion against the government.
Those 4 members of the Oath Keepers militia are convicted of seditious conspiracy.
The Oath Keepers were founded in 2009 by U.S. Army veteran and Yale Law graduate Elmer Stewart Rhodes, commonly referred to as simply just Stewart Rhodes. He founded the organization partly as a reaction to Barack Obama's election as president, as well as his growing concerns and fears of the government. Rhodes announced the founding of the organization on April 19, 2009, at a rally held in Lexington, Massachusetts, purposely picked for its symbological significance as the site of one of the first battles of the American Revolution. In that first year, Rhodes and his new organization would mostly focus their recruiting through the avenues of law enforcement, the military, and Tea Party rallies, with members sending emails to individuals in those circles, encouraging them to join the Oath Keepers. Members also ran for political office in many places, with over a dozen Oath Keepers running for sheriff across the U.S. in 2010. From the beginning, the organization attracted those who encouraged and wished for violence against the U.S. political system. The first Oath Keeper member to be convicted was Daniel Knight Hayden, who was sentenced to 8 months in prison in 2010 for posting a series of tweets threatening to kill police officers on tax day to start a war, along with a few others in the following years, including an Oath Keepers chapter president. Despite this, the Oath Keepers remained a mostly obscure organization until 2014, only participating in a handful of public events and programs such as their CPTs, or Civilization Preservation Teams, which were essentially armed neighborhood watches that were established to provide aid during natural disasters, terrorist attacks, and other emergencies. Rhodes used these programs to help demonstrate that the Oath Keepers were, at their core, a non-threatening and non-violent organization. This changed in April 2014 when an incident in Nevada led to an armed standoff between Oath Keeper members and the U.S. government. The nationwide attention this garnered led to a shift in the organization, one that pushed it to pursue a more active and interventionist role. They regularly went to provide, or at least went to try to provide, security in locations such as the Republican National Convention in 2016 and others. The group also began to shy away from a more politically neutral stance, one that they had held before, and began to be accused of racism and homophobia for their specific participation in events, claims which the organization denied. They also, for the first time, endorsed a presidential candidate in Donald Trump, with Rhodes and the Oath Keepers providing security for Trump rally attendees. During Donald Trump's re-election campaign, the organization pushed the rhetoric of a stolen election, culminating in the January 6th storming of the Capitol. There were many members of Oath Keepers present during the storming, with them doing not much to hide their affiliation, wearing uniforms and gear emblazoned with the Oath Keepers' insignia. Due to the suspected Oath Keeper involvement in sightings of Oath Keeper members during the storming, the FBI launched an investigation into the involvement of the group with the attack, which revealed that Rhodes gave advice on gear to bring to the Oath Keepers members that were involved with the storming, although he denied giving a command for it to be done, instead claiming that the reasons for the members' attendance was there to provide security for VIPs. The investigation eventually led to Rhodes' and 10 others' arrest for seditious conspiracy. The event led to quite a fracture within the organization, with many local chapters breaking off and a new president, Kelly Sorrell, being elected into the organization in lieu of Rhodes.
When discussing the general ideology practiced by those in the Oath Keepers, it's relatively simple to understand. For starters, the Oath Keepers pride themselves by making each member take what they call the Oath Keepers Pledge, which is very similar to the vow of service that many in the active duty military have to give when they join the military. However, this pledge is a little bit different because the Oath Keepers really ask their members to defend the Constitution and the Constitution alone from enemies both foreign and domestic. With this oath, members vow themselves to refuse cooperation with the government by declaring that there are certain orders given by those in the government that they would refuse to follow. And they read as the following. Number 1, we will not obey orders to disarm the American people. 2, we will not obey orders to conduct warrantless searches of the American people. Number 3, we will not obey orders to detain American citizens as unlawful enemy combatants or subjugate them to military tribunal. Number 4, we will not obey orders to impose martial law or any state of emergency on a state. Number 5, we will not obey orders to invade or subjugate any state that asserts itself or its sovereignty. Number 6, we will not obey any order to blockade American cities, thus turning them into giant concentration camps. 7, we will not obey any order to force American citizens into any form of detention camps under any pretext. Number 8, we will not obey orders to assist or support the use of any foreign troops on U.S. soil against American people to keep peace or maintain control. 9, we will not obey any orders to confiscate the property of the American people, including food or any other essential supplies. And lastly, number 10, we will not obey any orders which infringe on the right of the people to free speech, to peaceful assembly, or 3, to petition their government for a redress of grievances.
There's no expiration date on that oath. Hey! It is for life.
The irony of the Oath Keepers Pledge is that it omits one very crucial statement from the oath of service stated by those in the enlisted military, which that being, obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed above me. Now, as anyone could guess, the core belief of the Oath Keepers is to fight against a tyrannical government that seeks to undermine the Constitution. Furthermore, this belief holds so much power within the organization itself that many do believe that there are schemes within our government to try and take over and destroy the constitutional republic that many Oath Keepers vow to protect. As a whole, the Oath Keepers believe that the American government as we know it is slowly being undermined, not only by the corrupt politicians that are in power, but they also fear that the United States is going to be overrun or is currently being overrun by the standards that are being implemented by countries abroad. And this mainly applies to what many Americans believe will turn America into this one world order. However, this mainly stems from a lot of Euroscepticism within the Oath Keepers and other far-right groups, and a lot of major distrust towards the United Nations as a whole within the Oath Keepers organization, which they believe is a threat to American sovereignty. Now, due to the strong fear that American sovereignty is being undermined, the Oath Keepers have been on record for showing strong flashes of Islamophobia, nativism, and especially anti-immigrant sentiments. Now, it is worth noting that following the 2016 election, the Oath Keepers went from being an organization that used to criticize both the left and the right, but then it went into fully supporting now previously President Donald Trump and his election. With the election, many speculated that those in the Oath Keepers view Trump almost as an ally due to the fact that in terms of the organization's goal to try and expose the elite corrupt and that many believe were controlling our country. Thus, when Donald Trump was in his election talking about draining the swamp or the existence of a deep state within the American government, this resulted in a lot of support from the Oath Keepers. As a result, the Oath Keepers' support for the Donald Trump administration, they slowly began to align themselves ideologically, not only with the president's platform, but with other ideologies from other radical right theories and the beliefs that were held by other far-right groups at the time.
The Oath Keepers perpetuate classic far-right rhetoric to their followers. Namely, they advocate for nativist policies, extreme distrust of the government, the need for a rebirth of the nation, and they follow the typical far-right structure and methods of gaining traction. One hallmark of the far right is the perpetuation of fear of foreigners. Far-right groups instill fear in their followers that outside influences are destroying their nation. The Oath Keepers advocate for nativist policies by claiming the southern border is letting in impure criminals that will increase crime rates. The Oath Keepers have been adamant that the benefits that Americans receive are only meant to go to pure-blooded Americans, not immigrants. Second, far-right organizations tend to have a strong distrust of the federal government and the corrupt other side that runs it. The Oath Keepers are a perfect example of this ideology. As mentioned, the Oath Keeper the Oath Keepers run on the platform that their members are keeping the oath to protect the Constitution and enact laws that the founders of the country would have wanted. Similar to their stark distrust of the federal government, the Oath Keepers advocate for the far-right and fascist concept of a rebirth of America. The Oath Keepers have idealized the United States at its founding, a time when the country was solely run by white Europeans and small government was the law of the land. Oath Keeper members believe that the current government has gotten far too powerful and fundamentally threatens the lives of American citizens. Members want to remedy this by a revitalization of more fundamentalist American ideals. Lastly, the Oath Keepers use a common far-right method of expressing their views, through demonstrations. Oath Keeper members have not been particularly involved in electoral politics. Therefore, they attract audiences and new members by staging demonstrations or protests. The Oath Keepers have organized many protests to counter the results of the 2020 election, protest the growing powers of the federal government, and show their frustration with the influx of immigrants at the southern border. Because the Oath Keepers see themselves as the protectors and security for the Constitution, most of the members at demonstrations are heavily armed. These protests have gained media traction due to the threat of violence, but ultimately, this achieves the Oath Keepers' goal of gaining publicity. The Oath Keepers also fit the far-right mold of organization structure. Although there are many local chapters, they are only loosely tied to a broader unified group. The local chapters have much more dominance, and many chapters hold differing views than the national chapter, such as the South Carolina branch, which separated after the January 6th insurrection.
The story of the Oath Keepers adds to the ongoing debate concerning policing in the United States, the security of the southern border, and what it means to betray the Constitution. Within the Oath Keepers, police and first responders make up a sizable portion of membership. These members have taken an oath to protect the Constitution through their chosen profession, but they want to go further to adhere to that promise, even when they're off duty. The Black Lives Matter protest in 2020 provided the Oath Keepers with the ideal target to organize against. In a tweet no longer available, Stuart Rhodes communicated the high stakes of this conflict. He said, "The first shots have been fired, brother," in reference to the death of a member of a far right-wing group, Patriot Prayer in Portland. The era of COVID lockdown and street protest advocating for racial justice fanned the flames of a group who feared a tyrannical government seeking to attack their own citizens. The calls for defund the police and ACAB served as an existential threat not only to the members of the Oath Keepers, but also to the ideas and beliefs they hold. As discussion on an equitable justice system continues, it is important to understand that the people on the ground policing communities are being groomed to join this extremist group by appealing to a common bond of protecting the Constitution. A critical part of the Oath Keepers' ideology is support for local law enforcement and political leaders who embrace their law and order view of the world. In 2021, leaked membership rolls revealed that the Oath Keepers had 38,000 members, which include active police, federal agents, lawmakers, and first responders. Two border states, Texas and California, had the most members on the leaked rolls. This fact illuminates just how impassioned members are in protecting the southern border. Not only that, an intentional recruitment tactic of the Oath Keepers is to target current and former Department of Homeland Security and Border Control agents in order to understand the internal mechanisms of these federal agencies. Federal agencies could be paralyzed if clandestine Oath Keepers decide to sabotage the agency they work for in order to prove fidelity to a higher purpose of protecting the Constitution. Both of these current issues which the Oath Keepers mobilize around are relevant to the underpinning of the most far-right militia groups, which is to protect the Constitution and instilling law and order. To the Oath Keepers, the activists protesting a racially biased justice and police system are undermining the authority of local police who have entered a quasi-holy covenant with the Founding Fathers. Further, immigrants who may cross the border illegally to escape persecution are an affront to the justice system ordained by legal documents. It doesn't matter if the Oath Keepers have to act violently, interfere with actual police, sabotage an official federal agency, or use intimidation tactics to instill order in their community. They are not the betrayers to the Constitution. To this militia group, the betrayers to the country are the activists and immigrants who coincidentally are non-white, poor, or otherwise marginalized in a version of America the Oath Keepers are ready to preserve.